The local disaster tour guide recently did a video covering bards in Pathfinder 2e. So I thought, why not build a 2e bard teamwork build for you guys? Remember to check out the description below for the local disaster tour guide, and that patronage at any tier gets you a cool Google Sheet for this build and future builds I will do on this channel, as well as some other really cool perks. Let's dive in. So the thing about bards is that they are very good at mind games. However, they do have a problem with undead and any creature that has high will saves or is immune to mental effects. This is why the next teamwork build that I do on this channel is going to help this bard deal with some of its issues. It is very easy to take advantage of a bard. However, what is not easy is for other classes to help the bard. But let's get into this build before we talk about the other one. First things first, our ancestry for this build is going to be a Gnome Duskwalker. Gnomes and Duskwalkers have some cool defensive stuff, and Duskwalkers have a feat that targets their reflex save instead of their will save. So when we need to do damage to an undead and we don't want to target their will save because they're undead, boom, we have something that does a ton of damage to undead. Though granted not till level 17. Our background for this build is going to be the printer background. This will give us multilingual, so we'll get 2 extra languages. We'll already get Common and Gnomish, but this will give us 2 extra languages depending on what our party is made up of. Our class for this build is of course going to be a bard, and we're going to be picking up the Maestro Muse. This will give us lingering composition. When we cast a composition cantrip that lasts for 1 round, like say Inspire Courage or something, we can make a performance check. If we critically succeed on the performance check, then the composition lasts for 4 rounds. If we regularly succeed, then it's 3 rounds. And if we fail, the composition lasts its normal duration, but we do not spend the focus point for this spell. Starting stats for this build should be Strength of 8, Dexterity of 16, Constitution of 14, Intelligence of 10, Wisdom of 12, and Charisma of 18. Now, for our first feat for this build, we're going to be taking Multifarious Muse. The Warrior Muse will give us the Martial Performance feat, which will let us be trained in all martial weapons. We need the Warrior Muse for a couple of reasons. First off, there are a few feats in this build that do require the Warrior Muse. Secondly, we need to be trained in all martial weapons so we can take our first archetype when we get to our free archetype. But we'll get to that later. There are also feats in this build that require the Maestro Muse, which is why we need both. You could also take the Warrior Muse first and then the Maestro Muse here. But we are going to need both for this build. Next, from our Maestro Muse, we're going to need Inspire Defense. This will give us the Inspire Defense composition cantrip. This will give all our allies within 60 feet a +1 to their AC and saving throws. They will also gain resistance equal to half the spell's level to physical damage. This is just to help us give our allies a little bit of defense when they need it. Next up, we'll be taking Defensive Coordination. We can only take this feat because we are a warrior and a Maestro Muse bard. When we use this feat and then cast Inspire Defense, we can raise a shield, but more importantly, one ally who is affected by the cantrip can raise a shield as well. The next build I'm going to build on this channel is a Redeemer Champion. This will allow the champion to raise a shield during the bard's turn, even if he doesn't have reactive shields. It will also help anyone else who happens to be using a shield in the party, like a fighter say. Inspire Heroics will make our Inspire Courage or Inspire Defense better. After casting the spell gained by this feat, if your next action is to cast Inspire Courage or Inspire Defense, make a performance check. This DC is usually a very hard DC of a level equal to the highest level target of your Inspire Courage or Inspire Defense. If you critically succeed on your performance check, then the status bonus gained from Inspire Courage or Inspire Defense increases to +3. If you regularly succeed, the bonus increases to +2. If you fail on the performance check, the status bonus does not increase, but you do not spend the focus point for casting this spell. This is just a direct upgrade to Inspire Courage and Inspire Defense. Granted, you do have to succeed on the performance check to get anything, but at least you don't spend the focus point if you fail. Okay, now it's time to talk about Courageous Assault. If you use this feat and then use Inspire Courage, one ally that was affected by Inspire Courage can make a melee strike as a reaction. This allows those melee attackers that don't take attack of opportunity to attack when it's not their turn. Now it's time to talk about Inspirational Focus. This will allow us to get 2 focus points back whenever we refocus instead of just 1. This will allow us to get 2 successful Inspire Heroics before we have to refocus. Allegro will give us another composition cantrip. This allows us to quicken one ally for 1 round. They can use the extra action to step, stride, or strike, giving the champion an extra action to get up to the enemy, or giving a fighter an extra attack, or even giving a spellcaster an extra action to step is all huge. Sure, this only works on 1 ally, but that might be enough. Next, we're going to take Harmonize. We have 3 composition cantrips in this build, and this will allow us to cast 2 of them at the same time. So we can help our allies' attack rolls and quicken them at the same time, or we can increase their attack rolls and their defenses, or we can quicken them and increase their defenses. Overall, great feat. You could even take this earlier if you wanted. There isn't really a good feat for us to take at this level, so that's why I'm taking this here. Then, for 18th level, we'll want to take Discordant Voice. When we use Inspire Courage, all of our allies that are affected get an extra 1d6 sonic damage to all of their strikes. This includes weapon strikes and unarmed attacks. This combined with Lingering Composition can make our allies do a lot more damage overall. And the final feat for this side of the free archetype is Symphony of the Muses. With this feat, we can now use Inspire Courage, Inspire Defense, and Allegro at the same time. Yeah, we're no longer limited to 1 composition per turn or at a time. This will work especially well with our Lingering Composition feats. Now we'll be able to keep up at least 2 of those for a really long time. And now we come to the free archetype. Our first archetype feat is going to be the Martial Dedication. This is one of the reasons why we need to be trained in all martial weapons. We become trained in either diplomacy or intimidation. Or if we are already trained in both skills, then we become expert in one of those. We also get a Marshal's Aura out to a 10-foot emanation. This gives all our allies within it a +1 status bonus on saves against fear. This won't stack with our Inspire Courage, but it is good to be trained or expert in intimidation or diplomacy. And we need this feat for other feats in our free archetype. Next up for our free archetype is Dread Martial Stance. When we enter this stance, we must make an intimidation check. If we critically succeed on our intimidation check, then our Marshal's Aura increases to a 20-foot emanation. Also, all allies within the emanation get a status bonus to their damage rolls equal to the number of damage dice of your weapon that deals the most. And finally, whenever an ally critically hits a foe within your Marshal's Aura, that enemy becomes frightened 1. This is just a better version of Inspire Courage. However, we do still need Inspire Courage for those allies that are not in our Marshal's Aura. If we succeed on the intimidation check, then we get the same effect as a critical success, except our Martial Aura does not increase. If we fail on our intimidation check, then we fail to enter the stance. If we critically fail on the intimidation check, then we fail to enter the stance and we can't use this action for 1 minute. The critical failure effect is also another reason why we need Inspire Courage as well. Because if we fail the check, then we can still give our allies a +1 on saves against fear and to attack and damage rolls with Inspire Courage. Now we're going to want to take Snap Out of It. With this feat, we can choose one ally who's affected by a mental effect that required a will save and has a duration of no longer than 1 minute. That ally immediately gets another will save against the effect with a +1 circumstance bonus. if they succeed on the will save, the effect immediately ends. Regardless of the effect of the save, the target ally is immune to snap out of it for 10 minutes. This is mainly to help allies that don't have good will saves. Because you never know, you might run into another bard or something else that targets will saves. Then we'll take our last martial feat, which is To Battle. You can spend 1 or 2 actions on this feat. Choose one ally within your marshal's aura who has a reaction available. If you spend 1 action on this feat, that ally can use a reaction to immediately stride. If you spent 2 actions, that ally can use a reaction to immediately strike. The purpose of this build is to help out our allies as much as we can during combat, whether that's giving them bonuses or letting them use reactions when they normally couldn't, like this feat does. Then we'll want to take our second dedication, the Unexpected Sharpshooter dedication. This will let us do some cool stuff with our bow. We're a bard, we don't want to be in melee. But since we want our dex to be high anyway, we might as well take some feats towards our bow, so that when we run into those enemies that have high will saves or undead, we can do some damage instead of just relying on buffing our allies. The dedication will give us the Accidental Shot activity. For 2 actions once per day, we can make a range strike and roll our attack roll and damage twice and take the better results. This attack also ignores any circumstance penalties to the attack roll, as well as the flat check to target concealed or hidden creatures. This archetype will also give us some good defensive options. Speaking of which, next up is Lucky Escape. Once per day, when a creature targets you with an attack, you can use this reaction. The attacker must roll twice and take the worst result. As you level up, you're going to run into more and more smart enemies. The smarter they are, the more likely they are to go after the bard. So this feat will allow us to get out of situations with melee attackers, and allow our allies to catch up with them so they have something else to worry about, which will allow us to keep doing what we're doing. Sorry, my mistake. There is one more feat under Marshal we need to take for this build, and that is Target of Opportunity. When an ally succeeds on a ranged attack against a target, we can use a reaction to make a ranged strike at a -2 penalty. If successful, combine the damage from both strikes for the purposes of weaknesses and resistances. Our melee attackers aren't gonna always be able to do melee strikes. This feat will allow us to add extra damage to their strike if they hit. Also, if we've got a ranged attacker in the party besides us, this will help them out as well. Then we'll want to take Unbelievable Luck. Now we can use Accidental Shot once per hour instead of once per day. Again, this is just so that when we run into enemies we can't really deal with, we can do some damage. Alright, we're coming to the home stretch with the free archetype, but now we gotta talk about I meant to do that. You can use this feat if your previous action was a ranged weapon strike that missed a foe within 60 feet. Now we get to roll a deception check to shove, trip, or disarm the opponent that we missed. Using a skill that goes off our best stat, which is Charisma, to shove or trip the opponent is really good. And that's why we want this. And our last feat for the free archetype is going to be Unbelievable Escape. Now we can use Lucky Escape once per hour instead of once per day. Again, this is just a defensive option. We mainly want to use this when melee attackers are trying to hit us, since our AC won't be as good as melee attackers will be. Now let's talk about ancestry feats. First up is Empathetic Plea. We can use this reaction against any foe that attacks us that we have not acted hostile towards. We make a diplomacy check against our opponent's will DC. If we critically succeed, the opponent wastes this action and cannot use hostile actions against us until the start of their next turn. If we succeed, then the target takes a -2 penalty on all its damage rolls until the beginning of its next turn. The penalty is -4 for an expert in diplomacy, -6 if we're a master, and -8 if we're legendary. If we fail the diplomacy check, then the target is unaffected and is immune to this effect for 24 hours. This is mainly so that if an enemy goes right for us at the beginning of combat, we can either get them to waste their action or just do less damage. This is more of a defensive thing than anything because smart enemies are going to go after the bard. And if we haven't attacked them or try to debuff them or anything, then we can use this feat. For another defensive option, we'll go with Unexpected Shift. With this reaction, if we would take damage, we can roll a DC 16 flat check. On a success, we gain resistance to the triggering damage equal to our level, and a +2 bonus on our saving throws against that effect, until the start of our next turn. Unfortunately, we also become dazzled for 1 round after using this feat. This will be our defensive option for when we can't use Empathetic Plea. Being dazzled for 1 round doesn't matter to us at all, because for that 1 round that we're dazzled, we can probably just buff our allies that round, instead of trying to target the enemy. But also, at level 9, we'll take Fortuitous Shift. This is just a direct upgrade to Unexpected Shift. Now the DC of Unexpected Shift decreases to 11, and we are no longer dazzled if we succeed. Okay, now we can start taking our Duskwalker feats. And first up is CALACA'S Showstopper. For 2 actions, we can smash in an instrument we hold or belt out a discordant note. This has the effect of Synaptic Pulse, but the effect is auditory rather than mental. The DC for this effect is going to be our spell DC, since that's going to be higher than our class DC. Each creature in a 30-foot emanation must make a will save. On a critical success, the creature is unaffected, of course. On a success, the creature is stunned 1. On a failure, the creature is stunned 2. On a critical failure, the creature is stunned for 1 full round. Sure, this is a once per day thing, but it's still very good for keeping melee attackers off us. We could also take the Synaptic Pulse spell. However, because this ability is auditory rather than mental, creatures that are immune to mental effects could still be affected by this ability, which will give us something to deal with creatures that are immune to mental effects. And our last ancestry feat for this build is going to be Yamaraj's Grandeur. For 2 actions, we can unleash a 30-foot cone that deals 14d6 slashing damage and 46 persistent slashing damage. This requires a basic reflex save against our spell DC, because that's going to be higher than our class DC, from all enemies in the cone. On a critical failure, the target also becomes sickened too. This is mainly so that if we run into a boss that has a high will save, but a low reflex save, we can target the reflex save. And this does quite a lot of damage, even for a 17th level ancestry feats. And that's why we're taking this. And then lastly, we come to the general feats. If you've seen my other build videos for 2E, you probably know the first 3 right off the bat. Of course, we're going to want to take Canny Acumen for our lowest save, which is going to be Fortitude. Then Die Hard and Toughness so we don't die. And then we'll want to take Prescient Planner and Prescient Consumable. This will allow us to pull out any piece of adventuring gear or consumable item at any time, as long as we have the gold for it, and it wouldn't make us encumbered. So if we don't have a spell for a situation, maybe we can pull out a potion or something for that situation. And that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 1 and 2E teamwork content. You can also check out the links in the description below. And don't forget to check out my other teamwork build later this week. That one will take advantage of this build as well as help it out. Remember, teamwork is vital, and I'll see you guys next time.